Welcome in Tilco Advisors. We empower construction material manufacturers with cutting-edge digital solutions. And now, welcome to our podcast, where we share insights from the world of smart construction technologies.
When you walk past a massive construction site like cranes swinging up in the sky, sparks showering down from welders, thousands of tons of concrete being poured, it is just so easy to think that what you're looking at is purely a physical process.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see the physical labor right in front of you.
Right. We see the steel going up. We see the glass being installed. But hovering right over that physical building, dictating exactly where every single beam, wire, and pipe actually goes, is this massive, invisible web of data.
Yeah, and historically, I mean, let's be honest, that web of data has been a complete and utter mess.
Just total chaos.
Exactly. We are talking about millions of dollars wasted just because someone poured a concrete foundation based on, say, version 3 of a blueprint when the architects were already working on version 7.
It's crazy to think about, and whether you are prepping for a major project meeting, maybe catching up on the architecture and engineering field, or you are just insanely curious about how the modern built environment is actually managed behind the scenes, this deep dive is for you.
Because today we are looking at the cure for all that chaos.
We are unpacking the ISO 19650 suite of standards. And since 2018, this has basically become the absolute international gold standard for managing information over the life cycle of a built asset, using what's called Building Information Modeling, or BIM.
And our mission today is really to cut through the extremely dense terminology of these standard documents. We want to unpack what ISO 19650 actually requires from the people designing and building our world.
Because it's a radical departure from how things used to be done.
A huge departure. It forces a complete transition from an uncontrolled, sort of ad hoc exchange of files to a highly controlled, secure, and collaborative method of working. It's a totally different mindset.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think, a lot of people hear the phrase ISO standard and they immediately picture this giant, dusty rule book created by bureaucrats.
Oh, for sure. Just endless red tape.
Exactly. Just more red tape for the people actually doing the real work. But reading through our sources today, focusing specifically on ISO 19650, explained and what it actually requires in practice, it doesn't read like a dry rule book at all.
No, it really doesn't.
It reads more like a survival guide for an industry that has just been plagued by these well-documented inefficiencies and massive budget blowouts. It completely shifts the focus from the physical bricks and mortar to the data itself.
And that shift in focus actually begins at the absolute inception of a project.
Yeah.
Long before a single shovel hits the dirt.
Before an architect even sketches a preliminary concept.
Exactly. The data has to be addressed first.
Yeah.
And ISO 19650 introduces this massive culture shock regarding who's actually responsible for that data. Under the standard, the client, who they formally refer to as the appointing party, is put squarely in the driver's seat.
It's appointing party. Got it.
Yeah, and they have entirely new, very heavy responsibilities thrust upon them now.
So let's dig into that appointing party role, because this seems to me like the biggest departure from the old way of doing things.
It really is.
Historically, a client, say a commercial real estate developer, might just issue a contract to a builder and say, hey, we want a state-of-the-art building and we want you to use BIM. Just, give us the 3D models when you're done.
Right, the classic just do BIM approach.
Yeah. But the sources make it glaringly clear that under ISO 19650, doing that completely fails to meet the requirements. You cannot just write do BIM on a contract and walk away anymore.
No, saying do BIM is essentially meaningless under this new standard. The appointing party is now strictly required to explicitly state their purposes for requiring these information deliverables.
So they have to know what they actually want to do with the data.
Exactly. They have to know what aspects of the physical asset they intend to manage over the next, say, 50 years, and then work backward from there to define the exact digital information required to support those specific objectives.
I love that. It is literally like getting into a taxi and just yelling, drive, without giving an address.
That is a great way to look at it.
Right, because you are going to end up paying a massive fare. You will just be driving around for hours, and you almost certainly won't end up where you actually wanted to go.
Yeah, the driver or, the contractor in this scenario might do a completely fantastic job driving. But without that destination, the effort is just wasted.
So how do they set that destination?
Well, the standard gives that destination a very specific framework. It requires the client to define two main things. First, their organizational information requirements, or the OIR. And second, their project information requirements, which is the PIR.
Okay, let's translate that alphabet soup for a second.
Fair enough.
If I am understanding the sources correctly here, the OIR is like the 10,000-foot view, right?
Yes, exactly.
So let's say you are a major hospital network and you're building a new wing. Your OIR dictates how your entire organization tracks maintenance across, I don't know, 20 different hospital campuses.
Right, the big picture stuff.
Yeah, you need to know when every single MRI machine or backup generator needs servicing, regardless of which specific building it happens to be in.
That is the perfect way to look at it. The OIR is all about the overarching business objectives of the organization itself.
Okay, and the PIR?
The PIR, the Project Information Requirements, is the ground-level view for the specific new wing being built right now. It dictates exactly what data the contractors need to hand over at the end of this one specific project.
So that the new wing's data can plug seamlessly into that giant 20-campus hospital network system.
Precisely. It bridges the gap between the single project and the whole organization.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Go for it.
If you tell a regional hospital board or a local school district that they are legally on the hook to define, digital information requirements and organizational data structures before they can even build a new cafeteria, they're going to panic.
Oh, they do. All the time.
I mean, they run hospitals and schools, not tech firms. How does this standard actually survive contact with the real world when the client simply doesn't have the technical vocabulary to do what ISO 19650 demands?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the standard actually anticipates that exact friction point. It does not let the client off the hook, but it does provide a very specific mechanism to handle that lack of expertise.
Which is what?
The standard explicitly dictates that if the appointing party is not competent enough to define those digital requirements themselves, they absolutely must seek third-party help.
Ah, so they hire it out.
Exactly. They are required to hire information management consultants to essentially act as translators. It forces accountability right at the start.
So a client can no longer wave away a disorganized project by saying, I'm just not a tech person.
Nope. If you aren't a tech person, you must hire someone who is, right at the starting line.
You either know what you are doing or you buy the expertise. I mean, that actually solves a massive problem.
It really does. It sets the foundation.
So let's say the appointing party does their homework. They bring in a consultant. They clearly define the OIR and the PIR. They know exactly what digital data they want at the end of the project. We now have to look at what that final deliverable actually is.
Right. What does the client actually get handed at the end?
Because jumping into these sources, I realized there is this major misconception out there about what an information model actually looks like in practice.
Oh, the glowing hologram myth.
Yes, the industry uses the term building information model, and the immediate visual that jumps into most people's heads is a glowing, highly detailed, spinning 3D geometric hologram of a building.
Like Tony Stark designing something in his basement.
Exactly. They picture something out of a sci-fi movie where you can virtually walk through the hallways and look at the piping.
And, I mean, while 3D geometry is definitely a part of it, ISO 19650 clarifies that an information model, specifically what they call a federated information model, is so much more than just the geometry.
Right, because when you look at how different countries rolled this out, like the UK National Annex to ISO 19652, they make it very clear that an information model formally exchanged with a client includes geometrical information, sure, but also alphanumerical information and standard documentation.
Which throws people off completely.
It really does. This means that a basic PDF certificate confirming the plumbing was inspected, or a spreadsheet listing the warranty dates for the HVAC units, or even a simple Word document recording the minutes of a design meeting, those are all technically treated as a piece of the model.
They are critical pieces of model. You can't run a building on geometry alone. But, and this is a big but, you cannot just hand over a thumb drive with a messy folder full of hundreds of random PDFs and spreadsheets.
Like meeting notes final v2.pdf.
Exactly. That doesn't fly anymore. And that is where ISO 19650 introduces the concept of information containers.
Okay, information containers.
The standard requires that every single piece of information, whether it is a massive 3D structural model or just a one-page PDF warranty, must be placed into a digital container. And that container must be governed by strict, standardized metadata.
So the metadata is essentially the digital shipping label glued to the outside of that container.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes.
The source material from Katenda offered some incredibly specific examples of what this looks like in practice. A container can't just be named Design V2.
No, not at all.
It has to have embedded metadata tags like the project name, the exact container name, say Architectural Design Stage 4, the author, the date, and its status, like published or draft.
And it even requires a classification tag, like IFC4.
Which is huge.
Right. And just to clarify that term for anyone not deep in the software weeds, IFC4 acts as a sort of universal language. It is essentially the PDF format of the 3D modeling world.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it ensures that if an architect designs a model using one specific software brand, the structural engineer can open it in a completely different software brand without all the data getting scrambled or lost.
Yeah.
It is all about true interoperability.
But I gotta say, locking every single PDF, every spreadsheet, and every 3D sketch into these hyper-specific containers with a dozen metadata tags, it sounds like a complete bureaucratic nightmare for a creative architect.
I know it sounds awful on paper.
Right. Are we just replacing physical chaos on the job site with digital red tape in the office? Like, why mandate this level of granular administration?
Because the alternative is relying on human memory to navigate a sea of digital files, which, as we all know, always fails eventually.
True.
Imagine a facility manager, say, 5 years after a building is totally finished, a pipe bursts behind a wall. Without metadata and containers, that manager is frantically opening hundreds of poorly named folders, trying to find the plumbing schematic and the valve shutoff manual while water is pouring into the hallway.
What a nightmare.
But by enforcing strict containers and metadata, you enable automated instant data retrieval. That manager can stand in the hallway with a tablet and just query the system. Show me every published plumbing container for this specific corridor.
And boom, the schematic and the manual appear instantly.
Exactly. The metadata proves that organizing the data is literally just as critical to the lifespan of the building as pouring the concrete correctly in the first place.
That transition from human searching to automated querying is just huge.
It changes everything.
So we have all these beautifully labeled digital containers. But if an architect in London needs to share them with a mechanical engineer in Tokyo, and eventually with a construction manager on a physical site in New York, email isn't going to cut it.
Email is the enemy of ISO 19650.
Right. So how does the standard prevent the inevitable version control chaos when hundreds of people are touching this data?
The standard dictates that all of these containers must live within a common data environment, or the CDE. The appointing party is required to establish this CDE to serve as the absolute single source of truth for the entire project.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because if you are listening to this and you have ever tried to collaborate on a massive Google Drive or Dropbox folder where 10 different people are saving over each other's work,
Oh, it's the worst.
creating duplicated files named final version 3 uses zone, you know the exact pain this industry faces daily. Crucially, the guidance explicitly states that simply using a standard shared drive does not meet ISO 19650 requirements.
No, the CDE is not just a digital filing cabinet where you dump files.
So what is it?
It is much more analogous to a highly secure digital assembly line. The CDE enforces a very strict workflow. A file does not just sit in a folder for anyone to view whenever they want. The standard defines 4 distinct states that information must move through, and it controls exactly who can see what at any given moment.
Okay, let's walk through those states. The first one is work in progress, or WAE.
Right.
This is where task teams are developing their information individually, right? Like, if the mechanical engineers are designing the ventilation shafts, they do it in the WIP state. And at this stage, no other discipline can access it. It is their own private digital sandbox to experiment, make mistakes, draft their designs.
Exactly. And you want that isolation early on. You do not want the concrete team looking over the mechanical engineer's shoulder and preparing to pour based on a rough sketch that might change tomorrow.
Makes total sense.
But when that mechanical team is actually ready to share their ventilation design with the structural engineers, to make sure the vent doesn't crash into a load-bearing beam, they move it to the second state, which is shared.
And this is where the mechanics of the standard get really fascinating. You can't just drag and drop the container from WIP to shared, can you?
Nope. The container must pass through what the standard officially calls a check, review, and approve gateway.
It acts like a digital quarantine.
That's a perfect way to describe it. That gateway is not merely a manager casually glancing at a file. The structural engineering team physically cannot open the mechanical file until the designated reviewer on the mechanical side applies their digital signature to the metadata tag, formally confirming it has been checked against project standards.
Wow. And once it clears that gateway?
Then it becomes shared And other delivery teams can finally look at it, collaborate, run clash detection to see if the vents and the beams are colliding, all that good stuff.
And the progression continues from there. The third state is published.
Right.
But to get from shared to published, the information must pass another strict gateway, the review and authorize gateway, which, if I read this right, often requires the client themselves to accept it.
Yes. The published state is really the holy grail of the project. This is the finalized, locked-in information that is legally used for binding contractual purposes, for detailed financial costing, and for the actual physical construction on the site.
And finally, you have the fourth state, which is the archive. This is basically a complete, unalterable audit trail of past versions.
Yes, it details the entire history of a container. It shows exactly who checked it, when they checked it, what the outcome was, and who ultimately approved it.
That's incredible for accountability.
It is. If you look at the real-world application, this CDE workflow is arguably the most powerful mechanism in the entire standard. It physically prevents the nightmare scenario we talked about at the beginning.
The wrong blueprint scenario.
Exactly. A site manager walking around with a tablet simply cannot open a drawing that is still in the work-in-progress state. The system hides it from them entirely. They can only access containers that have cleared the gateways and reached the published state. It completely eliminates the risk of building from an unapproved draft.
It just kills the "I didn't get the latest email with the updated drawing" excuse permanently.
Dead and buried.
The system enforces the single source of truth. But having this brilliantly structured digital assembly line is kind of useless if the people standing on the line don't actually know what their specific jobs are.
Right, you still need people to operate the line.
You have architects who want to focus on aesthetics, you have structural engineers who just want the building to stand up, and specialty contractors dealing with everything from landscaping to fiber optics. How does ISO 19650 ensure everyone knows their exact role without constantly stepping on each other's toes?
It acts as a digital referee, basically, by mandating the use of responsibility matrices. The standard requires project teams to heavily document the allocation of tasks before the work actually begins. And to avoid confusion, it requires two very distinct types of matrices.
Okay, the first one is an information management activities matrix. And this is essentially about administrative function, right? It defines who is actually taking on the role of managing the CDE itself. Like who is responsible for setting the information standards, who establishes the metadata rules. It allocates the overarching management tasks, so there is absolutely no ambiguity about who is running the digital infrastructure.
Exactly, that is the macro level. The second type is an information deliverables matrix, and this one is hyper-granular.
How granular are we talking?
This dictates exactly what piece of digital information is due, at which specific exchange stage, and who is contractually responsible for providing it. So, for example, at the end of the conceptual design phase, the matrix clearly states that the architectural team owes a very specific set of containers, while the plumbing team owes nothing yet.
It takes all the emotional guesswork out of collaboration. But looking at all of this, the gateways, the stripped metadata, the dense matrices, I have to ask, does this heavy structure actually stifle the creativity of the design teams? Does forcing a brilliant architect to fill out classification tags and consult a massive spreadsheet kill the creative process?
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is completely counterintuitive, but it actually liberates the creative process.
Really?
How so? Think about how much mental energy and billable time creative professionals waste on a typical unstructured project. They spend hours digging through messy servers looking for the right file, sitting in meetings, arguing over who was supposed to deliver a specific schematic, or worse, redoing a beautiful design because they were working off an outdated structural model.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Right. By standardizing the workflow and making responsibilities hyper-clear, ISO 19650 drastically reduces that administrative friction. It allows the architects and engineers to focus their time on actual design and problem solving, rather than acting as part-time data detectives trying to figure out which file is the real one.
So the administration is undeniably heavier up front during the planning phase, but the actual execution becomes exponentially smoother.
Exactly. You pay the piper up front.
And the standard doesn't just wash its hands and walk away when the physical keys to the building are handed over either. There is a huge emphasis on continuous improvement, specifically through a step called Activity 8 in ISO 19652, which focuses on project closeout.
Yes, Activity 8 is vital. It mandates the capturing of lessons learned. This is particularly crucial for repeat clients, like that hospital network we mentioned earlier, or a retail chain that builds dozens of stores a year.
Right.
It aligns heavily with the industry principles of soft landings. The goal is to ensure that the physical asset operates efficiently from day one and that the organization formally documents any friction that occurred during the digital delivery so it doesn't happen on the next project.
So bringing all of these DETS concepts together, what does this actually mean for the industry? We started by talking about the messy, invisible web of data that hovers over every construction site.
Right.
What ISO 19650 does is take that chaotic web and weave it into a perfectly organized, highly secure digital machine. It demands that the client explicitly defines their requirements up front. It locks every piece of project data into strict containers governed by metadata. It forces all collaboration through the rigorous, quarantine-like gateways of a common data environment. And it demands absolute clarity in who is responsible for what.
It truly represents a foundational shift in how the built environment operates. ISO 19650 is not a niche tech standard for the IT department to worry about in the basement.
Definitely not.
It requires total buy-in from the client, the project managers, the lead designers, and the contractors pouring the concrete. Every single person touching the project has to participate in the information management cycle for it to actually work.
And that is exactly why this framework is so relevant to you, the listener, even if you never plan on pouring concrete or designing a skyscraper. Whether you are managing a massive software rollout, planning a global marketing campaign, or just trying to organize a complex multi-team project in your own field, the core mechanics of ISO 19650 are incredibly valuable tools to steal and apply.
Absolutely.
Establishing a single source of truth, using hard gateways for approval before allowing teams to share work, and forcing the client to define exact requirements before anyone lifts a finger, those are universal keys to stopping chaos in any industry.
The discipline of strict information management is completely industry agnostic. ISO 19650 just happens to be applying those disciplines to the largest, most expensive, and most permanent physical assets human beings build.
Which leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought to wrap up our deep dive into these sources today. We are moving rapidly into an increasingly digital future.
We are.
And by following standards like ISO 19650, we are now building these incredibly robust, perfectly organized, flawlessly archived digital information models of our physical spaces. As these digital twins become completely integrated with the real-time operations, maintenance, and lifespan of our infrastructure, we have to ask ourselves, at what point does the perfectly organized digital information model of a building become just as valuable, legally and commercially, as the physical steel and concrete of the building itself?
It is a massive question for the future of real estate. I mean, if a physical high-rise exists, but the hyper-detailed searchable digital data required to safely maintain, renovate, and operate it is somehow lost or corrupted, how much is that physical building really worth on the open market?
Something to ponder the next time you walk past a construction site and look up at the cranes. You aren't just watching a physical building go up, you are watching a massive digital universe being meticulously containerized and archived for the next century. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
That's it for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed exploring how digital workflows are transforming the construction industry. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time for more insights into building smarter. Head over to our website. You'll find everything you need to keep building smarter. To give you the best listening experience,